Oh, hello everybody. It's Miss Darling in the studio, and I thought I would start this video by showing you a photo of my mom. This was her wedding photo. I did not include this in the journal I made for my sister, and now I'm thinking maybe I should. I didn't know where it was and found it after I had finished decorating her journal, and also after I'd finished mine. So I will look and see if maybe there's a place for me to work her into it as well. And anyway, I think she was gorgeous and lived to be 101 years old. And so she had a very long, rich, rewarding life. So it's nice to have this photo of her when she was, I think, 20 years old when she married. So, enough of that. Here is the final journal that I made for my sister, and I will also show you the final one I made for myself. You can see they're very similar and yet different. My sister's is that thick. It's a one signature journal, and mine is this thick as a two signature journal. This was the inside front of hers. I have this hitch post closure on mine, and you open it up, and I had this as the inside of mine. And then the inside back was like this. I have more lace, and then my back cover is the same photo that I put on the inside of hers, and then hers has this on the back. I found some Japanese fabric that had some of the same colors in it that we find here on the envelope. You can see I added some of the pink dyed fabric that I had in my last video, along with coffee dyed fabric, and here's the pink twine that I dyed, and I added one of my dangles there. Has some floral and some pink in it, and then here's another dangle I added to the middle of hers with Mount Fuji on one side, and then it just has this lace design on the back. So I was trying to decide which journal to show you the interior of. This one, of course, has far more in it, but since I was filming the making of this one, I probably should show you that one. And so we'll move this one aside for now. And rather than me sit here and glue things on and you watch that whole process, which, I mean, you know, there's nothing new about it, I thought it would just be a whole lot quicker and easier to just show you the finished product and just talk about what I did and why I did what I did. Obviously, I use this as an end page, and that covers over all of the lace and fabric that was brought from the other side over. And I use this as like an opening page, even though it's rice paper from Japan, and very lovely. And so I kicked it off with this really nice reproduction of a photo. These were friends of my mom and dad, and you can see her writing down here, wedding of Haruko Hori and Mr. Yokota in 1934. And so I just thought, you know, it's so it's so interesting. Here she is in this very traditional Japanese wedding kimono and headdress, and he's in a Western style suit, even in 1934. And I've included in the journal different imagery, vintage imagery from Japan of things that my sister and I would remember from our childhood. One of the things was the thatched roofed homes. And so here's an example of that. And then like the interior covered with tatami mats and the sliding doors. There's no shoji doors there, which are the paper ones, but anyway, this, kind of reminds me of the way the Japanese used to live. They're not so much anymore as they become more westernized. So we have some coffee dyed paper there. And then this is the pattern paper that I put there because she's been a lifetime seamstress and did alterations for brides and bridesmaids. And so this is an image I got from the internet and, put a frame with it and added it there to that. And then here's a grouping of couples and a single bride. And when you're doing groupings, let me point this out, usually odd numbers work best. So you can see I had 1, 2, 3, 4 photos, but it just kind of needed a fifth to make it an odd number, so I added the butterfly. And what that does is, any way you look at it, whether you go this way around, it takes you around the full oval. And that's what you want to guide how they view something and take in everything. And here's a threesome grouping, and these were geishas. They're all geishas, they're not brides, and I thought that was interesting. My sister loves blue, and I had this piece of blue rice paper, so I included that. Here's a vintage woodblock print, and I added the calligraphy, which means quiet, and so I thought she would enjoy that. And again, we have another geisha, added a butterfly to bring some of the green over here and tie that together. When I design my journals, I look at what I call a double spread, and I want it to have beauty and balance over the whole double spread. So I tend not to just treat them as individual elements. And so with the green that was in this, I added some there by attaching the butterfly. Now this is not a bride, but one of my mom's friends, Mrs. Shigawa. That's her handwriting up there. So I put that there. We have this piece of white. This is a thin piece of white rice paper. And then for our memories section, here are shoji doors. And my sister, we would definitely remember growing up with shoji doors, and whenever my mom planned to replace them, because periodically someone would put a hole through the paper somewhere, so she would replace the paper on the whole door. And when we knew she was going to replace it, she let us go around and poke holes in all the different squares of a door that she was repapering. And so that kind of reminded me of that memory. And here you see a geisha on the tatami floor, and this is a different kind of sliding door. Here we have what's called a kakemono, and so it was just a beautiful imagery, and particularly the ladies in the traditional kimonos, which kind of really have gone by the wayside. They really only dress up in their kimonos on holidays like on New Year's Day or for a wedding. And here's a beautiful bride. I put a frame around her. Wanted to pick up on, some of this brown tone with against this brownish rice paper that I've had for many, many years and just never did anything with it. So now it's in here. And here we've got a couple of, or 3 photographs. This is a typical village in Japan, even as it looks today. Here's a vintage photograph of a street, and you see the women in their kimonos, and very typical street in any town, Japan. And here's another imagery of someplace in Japan, which I thought was interesting. And here's one of my mom's friends, and here we have the old-fashioned rickshaws. You used to ride around in the cart, and they would be driven by these men who would walk or run and take you where you wanted to go. And it was called a rickshaw. And here we have another lovely bride. One of our longtime memories are the farmers. During the spring season, they would get out and by hand they would plant little stalks of rice, and they would bend over all day and they would be out there sticking these rice stalks in the muddy water, and then watching over them as they would grow into a whole field of rice. This is Osaka Castle. I went to school in grade school for many years in Osaka City, and that's a very famous castle there. And here's a typical street in Osaka back then. These are all vintage images. And here we have another couple, bride and groom, that were friends of my parents. This was taken in 1921, and Mr. and Mrs. Tsunekawa. Here is a photo of my parents' longtime, maybe their best Japanese friends. This is Mr. and Mrs. Sugano, and he's in a military uniform. I think it was written down here, Lieutenant and Mrs. Sugano. So he must have been a lieutenant in the Army. This was taken in 1917, and is their wedding photo, I imagine. And here's a piece of the lace that I dyed with the pickled beets in my last video. This is one of the stationery cards, and here I've included 2 images of geisha. This one's in a bridal kimono, and this is in a regular kimono. I think she was probably the most famous, most popular geisha at the time in all of Japan. And this is just some imagery that I have on hand. This is a friend of the family, Miss Kazusa, 1939. So I included her there. She looks young, and that also looks like a kimono that a young person would wear as opposed to an adult. This is a grouping I did, and this is another one of my mom's close friends, and I think she was a neighbor at one time, and I made a grouping. And here are 2 images, vintage images of a shopping street in Kobe City that my sister and I frequented every time we went to Kobe. It's one of those streets where there's no vehicles that go down other than walking a bicycle, and shops on both sides. It's very famous, and called Motomachi. I know that my sister will really enjoy seeing those 2 images. Just decoration. Another geisha, and more wedding couples and a bride. Another couple friends of my parents, 1912. Everybody looks so somber because that was the style back then. No one ever smiled. Here's another bride, another couple. And here are a couple of vintage images of Lake Nojiri. And Nojiri was a lake where a lot of English American families had cabins there and would go there on vacation. And my grandmother donated money so that my dad could build us a cabin, and so we would go there every summer and vacation. And he had a sailboat, and we would enter the daily races. It wasn't a very good or fast sailboat, so we always had to go in the handicap races, but you know, we had some fond memories of sailing and swimming on Lake Nojiri. And here's just a really cool looking piece I added there. We're on the back side of the journal now, and here's another photo of a wedding couple that my parents knew, taken in 1926. I think it was just so fun to run across these photos in her things and be able to do something, hopefully, that my sister will enjoy as much as me. Another wedding bride. More friends of my parents, taken in 1916. Doesn't matter. More friends of the family, and you can see now in this one we have a bride who's wearing more Western style bridal gown, and the man is in a Western style tuxedo. Dr. and Mrs. Hana, taken in 1930. And then we come to the end, and that was the back, inside back cover. And here's an envelope that I have stuck a lot more ephemera inside of that for her to enjoy, and I'm just going to stick it here at the back. And then this is the image that I put on her back cover. So that gives you a nice peek through her journal. Mine is quite similar and yet different. So here's my opening. I used the same photos, and the only thing that's different really is some of the placement. I had an old postcard, a Japanese postcard I hadn't done anything with, probably had it about 15 years, so I included that. And I have the thatched roof, but I also have a photo of the tile roofs that were very popular. And you don't see much, you don't see this really at all unless you leave the cities. And this was some ephemera I happened to have on hand. I added to, this is one of the stationaries that I think I showed earlier. And I'll just move through these quickly because I've already talked about the photos. I have more space in this journal for actual journaling, and we've seen these photos before. Here I added a pocket, and then these are a couple of tags that I had made previously, and with, you know, a Japanese background. So I pulled those out from my stash and then added this bookmark in there. And so this is really the only place I put a pocket. Here is my artist stamp showing that I made this journal. Here's another one of the stationery sheets that are so beautiful. And I kept this simple because, you know, the Japanese style is not at all gaudy. It's a very simplistic style, and so I did not want to clutter this journal up, and just tried to kind of remain, I wanted to add various ephemera in here, but do it in a classy, simplistic way. And so I hope I've achieved that. And you can see how I have used groupings to fill a page. It's another one of those. This was a postcard. And here is some of the threads that I took from the fabric I used on the tassel. I don't know what you call that out there, but and you can see, you know, the photos are really pretty much the same. Just a few variations, and so I'll just flip through this carefully. You know, work on the angles, if you know, to change it up so that your groupings aren't all the same. And that was the end of signature 1. Here's signature number 2. Another postcard I've had in my stash for years. This is a tag I made from one of my Japanese masterboards, and then 3 faux stamps there showing each one has Mount Fuji in the background. A piece of ephemera in my stash, another stationery sheet, a wedding couple. This is that shopping street, Motomachi, I spoke about before. Another tag I made some while ago. 2 brides. Some more Japanese rice paper. The Suganos, the couple that were my parents' longest friends. They've all deceased now. A friend of my mom, she was a teacher. The lake. Another pocket and another tag from one of my Japanese masterboards. And just kind of flipping through here quickly. Just, you know, I like to do, you know, counterbalance. So if I do something up here, I'll often do something lower on the opposite page for balance. It's asymmetrical balance, which, if you notice, in Japan, they're almost all design in Japan is asymmetrical. You see what I mean? One of the things I'll just point out, a difference between Chinese writing. In Chinese writing, you only see these more sophisticated, elaborate characters. And you know when it's Japanese when there's these small little characters off to the right side, which helps a reader read the larger character. That's very common in Japan, to have the little small characters off to the right side. Some more geishas, using the angle to create something a little different. And that was the end of my journal. Here was my inside back page, and here's the envelope I'm including in mine that has more ephemera in it, and my back cover. So it's just a quick walkthrough. I hope it's been enjoyable for you and that you've learned something as we've gone through this. Oh, I added a dangle to mine up here, and so yeah, that was it. Be sure and check my Etsy store and also the description box for links to products that I may have used in the video. And I appreciate you being here and going through this with me. I enjoyed making these a lot, and so yeah, that's it for this series, and thanks for being here. Hope you come back. If you found this video helpful and valuable, I hope you'll give it a like and share it with friends and family, and hope to see you again in my next one. So for now, this is Miss Darling calling this a wrap. Bye-bye.